Good morning, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining the BSCGT Early Career Researcher Webinar Series. I am your host, Carly Bliss, and today we welcome Dr. Emma Williams, also known as the Nerd Coach from EJW Solutions. So hi Emma, thank you for joining us today. So Emma has worked in and around universities as a researcher, a staff developer and consultant for over 20 years. Including head of academic practice at the University of Cambridge, where she developed training programs for researchers. However, since 2009, she has built her business working with universities both in the UK and overseas. She offers a range of expertise, and her mission is to enable early career researchers to take the next step positively and proactively in their careers. She works with those who want academic careers and those who want to explore other options, and also that big pool of people who aren't really sure which avenue they want to pursue. She runs career planning workshops, CV clinics, researcher roadmap sessions, and teamworking events. But today we will be focusing on her expertise in fellowships and fellowship writing. So she'll be presenting a canvas that she has developed to help ECRs plan and execute their fellowships. So I'll invite Emma to share her screen now, and I'll quickly go over some housekeeping rules before I hand over to Emma. So during Emma's talk, you can submit questions during the using the live chat window at the right-hand side of your screen. You'll need to sign in using your Google account or YouTube account. To submit a question, please enter your name and your affiliation. And once Emma has finished her talk, I will ask those questions to Emma and we'll get to interact a little bit with Emma. If you're having any problems submitting questions, you can use the admin team email address at the bottom. I hope to get through everybody's questions, but I will try and do them in order. So do submit your questions early if you're really keen for that question to be asked. So without further ado, thank you again, Emma, for joining us, and I will hand over to you.
Pleasure. Okay, so hopefully you've memorized those instructions. I'll move on to my slides. So this morning, I'm going to take you on probably quite a whistle-stop tour about fellowships and a tool that I found is really helpful in using in planning fellowships. So if you haven't delved into the world of fellowships, there is a big form at the end, as there is with all things academia. There is always a form that you have to fill in, and it pretty much covers the entire range of your fellowship. So it is much, much more than just a simple here's what I want to do, here's my research. It's a lot more than that. It's about your impact, how it fits with the strategy of the funder, who you're going to work with, why you're going to work there, why you're the ideal person to do the work. There's lots and lots to think about. And quite often, having worked with many, many researchers on their fellowship drafts and trying to improve them, I dread to think how many fellowships I've read, but it is in the hundreds, is that quite often we miss out some key bits, or they are weaker, and you can't afford to have a weak section in an application. And so it's very, very important to try and map the field out. And I found that these research canvases are a really good way of doing that. So I'm going to come on to the canvas. Don't panic, it is in here. But I just wanted to start with sort of a top 10 key mistakes that people make so that you're aware of those, and then you can hopefully see the utility of the canvas. Carly gave me a lovely introduction, so thank you for that. But just to reiterate that I have looked at lots and lots of fellowships. So this talk is really standing on the shoulders of the people who've gone before. So thank you for those people who've entrusted their fellowships to me. But I've read lots of different types of fellowships. So Royal Society fellowships, EPSRC, MRC, all sorts of fellowships. And they all do need this broad map. So that's where we're going to dive in. But I'm going to start with sort of a top 10 list of mistakes that people make. So the first mistake is timing. It takes a long time. So wondering if you're sat there thinking, I'm not quite sure why I would do a fellowship. A fellowship is a great way of going from planet postdoc to permanent position, and that for the majority of places in the UK would be probably a lectureship position in a university, but obviously you're worldwide, international bunch, so I'm just going to call it permanent position for now. And in that permanent position, you will run your own group, apply for your own grants, probably have some teaching and some other university or research institute responsibilities. Going from a postdoc where you're working probably on someone else's project to that effectively running a group is a bit of a quantum leap. And therefore the fellowships sort of sit in the middle as a stepping stone. So you apply, you get your own independent money to run your own project. So it's all about you, which is quite different to a grant where you might be, writing more collaboratively. But in order to go from tiny little nascent idea of what you want to do for your fellowship and applying takes much, much, much longer than you think. I think a sort of minimum turnaround is 3 months, and it's probably more likely to take you 4 or 5. Partly because you have to get all your ducks in a row, which is a phrase I love. It might be actually more cats in a row, because if you have ever asked an academic to get back to you with some feedback, you know how long that takes. Okay, so, and you need to do that repeatedly with finance people, with your sponsor, with the organization, with the funder, with the people giving you feedback on your application. It takes a long time, and you've got to write it. Some are very short. Leverhulme, for instance, quite short application. Some are very long. So, Royal Society goes into sort of pages and pages. But it does take a long time to not only come up with the idea and discuss it and make sure it's a solid idea, but then to translate that onto paper. And that's where the Canvas can really help. But you do need time to do this. So why I'm saying use a Canvas, you think, oh, that's another thing that I've got to do. But actually, I think it will save you time in the long run because you've mapped lots of stuff out. So timing is the #1 mistake that I see. People are scrabbling towards the end, trying to fit 47 hours into a 24-hour day. The second one is that people don't talk to each other enough. So there's these cute little Tweety birds here, possibly shouting at each other, but people are reticent when they come up with a little idea that they want to pursue as an independent research plan. They think either get 2 things, so, or I can possibly talk about it, and that's not false modesty. I think it is partly just like, worried to share your idea. Is it good enough to be a fellowship? The other worry that people have is someone's going to steal my idea. But what is key to fellowship applications is feedback, feedback, feedback. You need to be talking to people. Obviously, you need to find the people that you know and trust. And again, this comes into that timing. You need to build a network of people. So even if you have tuned in today and you are very early in your career and you think fellowships are a long way off, build that network of people who you can ask for feedback, who you trust, who you know are perhaps thought leaders in the field, who will really give you some good advice. And you need to talk to people about, is this a good fellowship to apply to? Is this a good project? How do I do the finance? So you need to talk to a wide range of people, and that network of people doesn't happen overnight. So do talk to people. The other thing that you need to talk to is that you will need to host your fellowship somewhere. So that institution or university will need to know about you. And we can't build that know, like, and trust instantly. No, it's like, you know, I've just met you and I'm asking you to marry me. You know, that's not going to work. So we need to talk to people. We need to build that network up. And again, that is something that I find that postdocs have not done enough of or are worried about. So that's mistake number 2. Mistake number 3, wherever you are, and I understand that you will be all over possibly the globe, is use the resources at both your own university or institution and where you want to host. Okay. Quite often universities have put a lot of money into developing their research services unit. Now that will be called different things in different places because no one university ever calls things the same as another university, but find that unit that is supposed to help you write grants and fellowships. And I think if you go to their webpage, you are going to find a lot of helpful stuff. So I was working at the University of Oxford a couple of weeks ago. They're one of my regular clients. And the number of postdocs who have never looked at their absolutely fantastic resources for writing grants. And this is the internet age. So if your own university doesn't have something helpful, then go and look at someone else's. It's all usually really good advice. The Oxford one pretty much steps you through what you need to do to apply for a fellowship or a grant, including some helpful advice, helpful web pages, etc., etc. So use the resources available to you. If that includes people like myself who are research developers, or if you've got grant facilitators or something in associated with your department, then ask them, you know, have an initial chat with them, buy them a cup of tea, grease the wheel slightly, but use the people resources and the web resources. They are there and they are manifestly helpful, and there's no point discovering those after you've done a lot of hard work. So find them initially and use the resources at your fingertips. A fellowship application is all about the 3 Ps. So the 3 Ps are the person, that is you, the place where you are going to host your fellowship, and the project. So what you're going to do. Now, in my experience, most researchers write the project section very, very well. You know your research. You're super, super clever, super, super bright. Okay, so you know all that. So it can come down to, actually, I haven't put enough of me in. I haven't put enough of the person in. And I haven't put enough of why I want to do this project at that institution. So there is a balance to be had. You need to write strongly about yourself, and you need to write strongly about why that place is good. So balancing those across your application is really good, and that's where the Canvas can really help. I missed one now. 4. We're on to point number 5. We're halfway through the list, and then we can dive into the Canvas. So quite often there isn't enough person. So we've got this beautiful big cat hiding behind the tree here. You know, this is one powerful being, and yet they are in camouflage. They are disguised, perhaps behind their project, perhaps behind what's gone before. You need to emphasize why you are fantastic for this project throughout. Okay, so when you're talking about your methodology, highlight why, how it's come about, why your previous experience will help you do the project. When you're talking about the impact, discuss any impact that you've already had personally. Discuss your personal connections. Quite often people hide behind their previous research supervisors and principal investigators. in a personal award for a fellowship, they are looking for more of you. So don't be this beautiful, powerful, big cat that is hiding. You need to be roaming around on the prairie or wherever it is the big cats go. But you are this powerful beast, and you need to really emphasize that throughout. Number 6, the big mistake is not enough place. So quite often we'll go, oh, I'm going to do my, I'm going to host it. Oh, where shall I host it? In the Bahamas. Okay. Why in the Bahamas, Emma? Well, because they've got a really nice beach. Okay, not a good reason. You really need to explain to your funder why you have chosen that particular place. And this comes in lots of different dimensions. So you've presumably chosen a department to host in, and then an institution on top of that. And you might have even chosen a country for something international like a Marie Curie. So you really do have to explain why you have chosen those. It needs to be an active decision. Quite often people want to stay where they are, and I fully understand that temptation. But if you have to stay where you are because they have the big piece of kit in the university that nowhere else has, then think about moving department. Bring some extra nuance into your application. And with place, you really do have to think about, does this choice of place show that I'm an independent researcher? If you stay in the same group that you have been in since you were 18, and you might think, well, that's nonsense, Emma. I haven't been in a research group since I was 18. Okay, you might have gone to that department for your undergrad. You might have done your final year placement in that lab. You then went on to do a master's or a PhD in that lab. You stayed as a postdoc in that lab. If you want to host a fellowship in that lab, I'm thinking, that's not independence. You are like the teenager who never leaves home, or like my own teenagers who have gone to university and one's coming back. So it's not demonstrating independence. So making sure that you emphasize the place, why it is good. And that will be equipment for sure, lab space. There might be financial considerations. So they might be offering you PhD students or extra money for kit or space, put all those in. But the other thing that you need to look at, and this is increasingly on the applications that I'm seeing, is how that place will support you in growing and developing. So do make sure that you've looked at what that gives you. So quite often universities, they're getting better at providing resources for people like yourself. So early career researchers, including fellows, how do they support fellows? They might have a fellows network or offer distinct training for fellows. There might be things that you can tap into sort of for junior lecturers that apply to fellows as well. So do make sure that you really emphasize why that place is going to be fantastic for you. I'm not quite sure where the pin is. I'm just based just south of Cambridge, so I'm about here in Duxford, somewhere in deepest Essex is where that pin is at the minute. Okay, we've got a few left. Too much project. So quite often we will be absolutely clued up with the project because that's what we know and that's what we love, because we're researchers and we love to do our science. But sometimes we can do too much of this. We can try and squeeze too much of it into that 4-page limit that some of them have, or word limit, and we can try and put everything in. And what you need to do in a fellowship is highlight the excellence throughout and to keep it reasonably high level. Yes, you need work plans, etc., but no one is going to be the expert in your project like you are, okay? Your panel are not going to be the experts. So you can't take us on a huge deep dive in 3 or 4 pages, we're going to get lost. So I think the temptation is to put too much science in, at the risk of losing the reviewer. The reviewer is reading this and they are reading it quickly. If they give your application 20 minutes, I'd be surprised. Okay, so it's going to take a long time to understand if you go into that deep dive, and they'll stop because they've reached the end of their allocated time for fellowships today and they've moved on to the next job on their predictably busy academic lives. So make it quite succinct, but emphasize your excellence and how you tie into the project and why that place is important. That's why we need that balance. Okay, got 3 left, I think. Oh yes, this is my favorite one. So you are not a clone of your PI. Being a fellow is about being independent, absolutely. And so you need to not emphasize too much what's gone before. So mentioning your supervisor or principal investigator in every single line is a bad thing to do. But also mentioning the host or sponsor or whatever the fellowship call calls them that you're going to have in your new environment. It is about you, and it is about standing on your own 2 feet. And that's what you need to do. So every time you write someone's name in your application, think, okay, this is space. I've got so much golden real estate in my fellowship application. Why am I mentioning someone else's name? Quite often it's a hard shift to write, I will do this, I have done that, I am excellent at, compared to how we normally write, which is we, or we write in a collaborative manner. But you need to demonstrate independence, and putting in too much of your previous PI, they will always be a part of your network, whether you like it or not. But it's about developing other people in, who can add to the project. It's about your personal network, about growing into that independent scientist. I love this TLDR. Too long, didn't read. Sometimes this happens in the project that we've just gone too deep, and your poor reviewer is left going, huh? I tend to read fellowship applications when they're a little bit rough and ready, and quite often I'm a bit lost. Partly because it might have been cut and pasted about 60,000 times, and so something doesn't quite hang together, or it's been transferred from one fellowship application into another, and that square peg doesn't quite fit that round hole. So do make sure that you've made, firstly, that you've stuck to the word limit. If you don't stick to the word limit, you're an easy no. Okay, they're looking for easy no's. But making sure that you have used clear, concise language that is easy to read. Don't try and sound scientific. You are scientific. You don't need to sound it. You're fantastic as you are. I was reading something on Twitter just before I came on here that, kind of clear English is concise English. Don't use 6 words where you can use 1. Okay, or whatever language you're writing your application in. I would always try and get a native speaker to read through your application. That's another person you need in your network, to check that you haven't lost any of the nuances of the language. But thinking white space is your friend. So even if you've got a page limit, a wall of text is like, when I look at a wall of text and now I have to wade through it because someone is paying me to do so, I'm like, oh, okay, I have to. But if that was broken into paragraphs, you use headings, yes, it uses the space, but it makes it easier to read, quicker to read, easier to get from the page into my brain. And that's what you want. You want to convey how excellent you are to your reviewer so that when they go to the panel, they go, let's fund this one. So don't try and sound scientific, break up with white space, use headings, and make sure that it reads well. You will have someone in your life who is really good at reading and writing and perhaps proofreading. Get them on board. buy them lots of chocolate cake or whatever is required to get their help. And my final one is that recycling. So fellowships are competitive, absolutely, really, really competitive. And so you are probably going to apply, if you're going to go down this route, you're probably going to apply several. And so therefore thinking, what do we do? Do we write it afresh each time? No, you haven't got time for that. But you need to align your fellowship with the call. And again, this is something that the canvas can help you, because the canvas is a big picture thing that you can then reform for a different fellowship. So you can get your mindset into the funder. So Lever Hume are looking for very different things to perhaps the Royal Society, to perhaps the MRC, to perhaps Imperial Cancer Research Fund, whatever it might be. Okay, so you can recycle stuff for fellowships, and actually you're going to have to. But when you do so, make sure that you haven't just dropped it and gone, oh, that'll do. You have to tailor it. In the same way that if you are applying for jobs, you would tailor your CV. And if you aren't going to tailor your CV, see me later, because that's essential. But you need to make sure that you are aligned to the funding call, that everything about that application points to that. So if you are recycling, apologies, that better. Make sure that you are absolutely writing what they want to hear. You are keeping the same word counts. Big mistakes that I see are, it's like, oh, well, Royal Society asked for 300 words, so I put 300 words here, and it's like, well, actually it says 500 words. You're missing a trick. So do always read the small print on there. So those are your 10 top mistakes. So I'm going to come on to thinking about how we can use the business canvas adapted to reduce those mistakes, to help you plan. The canvas can be used at any stage. I think using it early on. So you could use it to plan out your next set of experiments. You could use it to plan out your career. People do those. It's a good tool because it uses a big map of everything involved. And quite often we will be focused on, say, the project, or in my own business, you know, kind of, I will have days where I focus on marketing, and I will have days where I focus on delivery. But there are other things that I miss out, like I haven't done my accounts for a while, all those sorts of things. So it's useful in making sure you've ticked all the boxes. So let's dive in there. So the thing that I love about the business model canvas, and this is one of my pet joys, is taking business ideas and then bending them to shape that means that we can, in academia, use them to our own advantage. Business model canvas is one of these, but lovingly, it came out with someone's PhD thesis. So, you know, absolute joy. When that happens, it's like, oh, academic thing, really, actually quite interesting. So it was initially developed by Alexander Ostwalder. Look him up on YouTube. He's quite entertaining. He's Swiss. He will give you a big breakdown on Nespresso and their business model as he explains his canvas, but he is, really quite entertaining to listen to. He came up with the idea that wouldn't it be great if we just put something about business onto a big canvas, so a huge piece of paper. That's all a canvas is. On a big piece of paper, and that we could play with it. So the idea was to use sticky notes, and Alex on his YouTube videos goes sticky note in a very beautiful way, but to use Post-it, sticky notes, whatever you call them, my desk is littered with them, to use those to play, to explore in a very cost-free way. So all you're going to have is a piece of paper, a pen, and some Post-it notes before you kind of spend ages writing your fellowship or your business proposal, whatever it might be, you can play with it. So that is where the model comes in. Okay, you are modeling this, and then when you look at it on paper, you go, it's not going to quite work. What can I change? If I move this post-it over here, does that help? Or if I add this person in, does that help? Or if I tweak my business idea, how does that help? Can I tweak my revenue model? Can I tweak my costs? So it's about playing, and I love that. You know, quite often we are, as researchers, we are really creative people. Something I didn't really appreciate when I was a postdoc, and probably appreciate more now I'm in business, but we are really creative people. And so we can do this, we can play, we can model. And so that's where the canvas really does come in. So it gives you a good overview. Some of you might have heard of the lean startup model. And again, this is an adaptation. We're going to use the lean startup as an example, and then come on to my own research canvas. Okay. So I was about to say hands up if you've got LinkedIn, but you might be watching this on repeat to various other things. So I'm assuming that even if you haven't got LinkedIn, and my other little soapbox is that LinkedIn is really useful for early career researchers, provided that you don't say postdoctoral researcher underneath your name, because guess what, there are hundreds and thousands of you on there. Put what you actually do underneath your name, and that will help you a lot. Free tip there, unrelated, but I've used LinkedIn because we've either all got a profile, or we kind of know how it works. So imagine that these little things are sticky notes, so just like this. And the colours are to do with the same type of people. So this is the canvas. You've got sort of the middle bit pulls it all together. The left-hand side, as I'm looking at it, is sort of things that we do, so internal stuff. The right-hand side is external stuff, so outward facing, if we were the business owner. Okay, and then at the bottom you've got the all-important money, so you've got costs and revenue, so going out and coming in. Don't worry, you don't need to be a financial whiz to use this at all. So if we start with customer segments, and we're going to use the yellow post-it note here of internet users. So that's me, that's you, anyone who's got a LinkedIn profile. Okay. How our relationships work is that I will talk to you, I'll link into you, I might look at the things that you put on there, I might look at the people in your network, and you might do the same to me. So we're pretty much on the same side of the fence on that one. And what is the value that LinkedIn is offering us? And this is a key bit, which I want you to kind of keep top of mind when it comes to writing fellowships, is what am I actually offering? What is in it for the funder? That is the big question that you have to answer in your application. What is in it for the funder? What is in it for the MRC to fund my research? What does UK PLC, don't like that term, but what does the UK get from funding my research? What does the discipline get from funding my research? Value proposition, that's what we're offering. LinkedIn is offering us, me and you, who've got profiles, we can manage our professional identity, and I'll happily link into anyone after this. And we can build our professional network. So partly it is that address book where someone else updates the addresses in it. But it can be much more than that. Like I say, I think it's a really powerful tool for early career researchers. So that's one example of customer segments. But because we've got post-its, we can play around with other customers. So other people who use LinkedIn are recruiters, perhaps advertisers, marketers, and perhaps developers, although they have clamped down on that external development so much since the slide was made. So each one has a different value proposition and a different perhaps relationship. The channels are how we get the stuff. So they're offering us this nice little present. How are we getting it? Well, we can go on the website, we can go on their mobile app. So there are lots of different ways that we can get it. The internal things that they do actually for LinkedIn is very straightforward. What do? They develop their platform. It's always changing. It needs to, because anything that stays still, we get quickly bored of. But they develop their platform, and also their key resource, the thing that LinkedIn have, is the platform. Take that away, they've got nothing. So that is their key resource. And then thinking about their partners, well, who do they need to put this show on the road? Well, they need a data center, and actually they need people like us to put something into that newsfeed. So otherwise there's no point, there's nothing in there other than an address book. So they need us to put in our profiles. They need for us to form those links so that other people can see the links. So we are the content providers, as well as in receipt of that value proposition. Cost structure, so what it costs them to do, obviously these are fairly straightforward. Kind of any computery thing is going to cost this. And then how do they get the money? So largely most people who use LinkedIn use it free. You can pay for premium. My advice would be not to. For an early career researcher, you don't need it. But then recruiters might be, buying special subscriptions, etc., etc. So their money probably comes from other people rather than ourselves. But people do buy LinkedIn Premium if they want to really take networking to that next level. So that's how they get money in. Okay, so brief example. Why do we want to apply it to research? Well, if you are thinking of writing a grant or a fellowship, you are looking at running effectively a startup enterprise. You'll have to manage a budget, you have to manage people. Even if they're not in your team, you're going to have to manage collaborators. You're going to have to present that offering, that present, to the funder. So it is a little business that you are trying to set up. So I think it doesn't take much bending of the canvas to apply it to this. The canvases have been used for personal career planning. So there's a really nice book called Business Model U, which uses the canvas to look at developing your career. And somehow, a fellowship kind of is part career development, part small enterprise, isn't it? So we are our own business in research. So there is a good overlap there. And it does make sure that you've thought of everything. And I'm really going to emphasize that if you do this at the planning stage, rather than a bit further down the line, it might save you a lot of time and energy, because you realize, oh, I haven't thought about all my stakeholders. I haven't thought about everyone who's interested in this, or I haven't thought about articulating what a beautiful present I am offering to the funder. So I'm going to try and underline that. Okay, so this is the business model canvas. You can get business model canvases, I think that's the plural, from this one's from businessmodelU.com, and they're all usually Creative Commons. The actual business model canvas, the original, comes from Strategizer with a Z and a Y, Strategizer. But if you put in business model canvas into Google, it will come up. The Strategizer website has lots of great resources as well. So there are plenty of free resources out there. This doesn't have to cost you a lot of money. So what we've got is the internal stuff on the left-hand side, the external stuff on the right-hand side, how we bring it all together in this present here. Now, don't worry, the boxes are very full of tiny writing. I'm going to go through the bits step by step in a moment. And then you've got the costs at the bottom and the revenue and benefits. Okay, so let's dive in. I'll just let you read that while I have a sip of water. So applying for a fellowship it does require a slightly different mindset. And therefore, I think using a new tool can get you into, okay, this is new. I'm going to have to step up from Planet Postdoc into an independent researcher. So I need something to help me. And I think using a new tool can kind of force that mental shift that you need to do. So Charlotte was a fellow at Imperial. All the other comments have come from new fellows at Imperial. So what you do, okay, let's start with absolute practicality. So there's man digging a hole here, but thinking about what you actually do. So it will be that distinguish your occupation from others. This is the key. So yes, we all use Microsoft Word, for instance. That doesn't distinguish you, but you're probably doing some amazing gene and cell therapy stuff. Okay, so what do you do? And try and delineate that. For a fellowship, you're looking for what makes you slightly different. Okay, so list out everything that you do to start with, and then think, right, how does this contribute? What am I going to put in the fellowship that proves that I can deliver this beautiful present to the funders? What is relevant to that? You will do some stuff that is perhaps not relevant to your fellowship, like teaching undergraduates. It's possibly not relevant, but if you are supervising undergraduates in research projects, that is relevant to your fellowship, because that's what academics do in their research labs. So thinking about those key activities. Who you are and what you have. Now, these are your key resources. And I think this is where people really struggle on fellowships. They think, oh, I haven't really got a lot of stuff. You know, I'm just a postdoc. If I had £1 for every time I heard I'm just a postdoc, I could happily retire. Alas, I don't. So we have, you will have navigated your own unique route through the university sector. You might have had time in industry beforehand. To where you are now. Make the most of it. That is what makes you unique. That is what makes you the tall poppy that might stand out against that other field of poppies that are applying for the fellowship. Okay, so think about who you are and what you have. You might have come to gene and cell therapy via a chemistry route, and you're surrounded by biologists in your field. Or you might have come from a computer scientist route and you're surrounded by biologists in your field, or chemists. You will have something unique to offer. So it's thinking about those. What have you got that are your resources? The other things here are your personal network. Who knows about you? Who do you work with? Who is in your network? Which contacts have you cultivated rather than your principal investigator or your research supervisor's network? Your reputation. That might seem an odd one, but have you been asked to speak at a conference? Have you been asked to give a webinar? What publications have you got? So there are things that you need to think about that really outline why you can do this. And I was putting together a proposal yesterday, the day before, and I was struggling with it. And, you know, imposter syndrome gets us all, doesn't it? And it was like, oh, I don't know why I'm doing this. And so my very good friend, and I would really try and work this through with someone. My very good friend said, Emma, Why have they asked you to do this project? Why have they asked you to tender for it? And I thought that was a brilliant question, because it uncovered several things that I hadn't really thought about. Well, I've got the skills, I've worked with them before, we like working together, all those sorts of things did then make it much easier. But it can be quite hard to articulate that on a fellowship, because we're not good at promoting ourselves in general. So work through with someone, make sure that there is enough of you, that person, in your application. Don't do one of those mistakes that we went through. How you help. So this is the present. Okay, this is in the middle of the canvas for a reason. We draw together all the stuff that you do, all the internal stuff, and we look at all the external stuff. So it might be those external people are people in your discipline, patients, doctors, technical people. There'll be all sorts of people that you work with. This is about what present do you give. And if you're writing a fellowship, this is like, what value do you deliver to the funder? Most of the funders are funded one way or another by the UK taxpayer, whether it's charitable or public funds. So what value do you deliver? And this will then come into your impact statement. But also that needs to be a strong thread of, if you fund me, this is what you get. And you need to be really clear on that. That is the thing that you need to come back to. So when I said, we do too much project and we do that deep dive, you are going to have to explain some of your science, absolutely. But we need that handrail to hold on to. So what is the handrail? What can I come back to? If you fund me, I will cure cancer. That type of high level, possibly overly optimistic, but it's that sort of handrail that we can come back to when we're getting perhaps a bit lost in the technical detail. So making sure that you can articulate that very easily. If your application goes well, you'll get to interview. One of the questions I'm going to ask you is, why should we fund you? You need that snappy answer, which is this present, which is in the middle. But you don't necessarily have to develop the middle box first. This is the great thing about having a canvas, having a play with Post-its, is that I can get clear on this bit and I can get clear on this bit. And it's like, oh, actually, I've got this and I've got this, which would be brilliant if I could do this. And I can do that. So that's the value that I bring. So the canvas, you can start anywhere. And build it up. You don't have to come, a bit like writing the abstract before you've done anything. That can be quite hard. You write the introduction to your thesis when you know what your thesis is about. So this is the same sort of idea, but it is this present that you want to give to your funder. Who helps you? So you don't have to marry your collaborators. I just think it's a rather sweet image on the business canvas of partners, but who helps you? Who do you need on board, or who would you like on board? And this is where you can get inventive, which might seem strange because you think, well, I could do this. But if you're trying to pivot your fellowship, so you think, okay, well, I need to stay in Glasgow or wherever I am because they have the machine I need. But if I stay in my existing research group, they're going to think I'm not independent. So I need to move department. By moving, say, hosting yourself instead of, I don't know, whatever it might be, the biology department into computing, what could you add to your project? What could you learn? A fellowship is also a period of training. What could you develop that would be amazing, that you would get from sitting in computing as opposed to biology, or chemistry as opposed to computing, or wherever it is that you are? So thinking about your partners, this is inventiveness. And also, if you're at the very new stage, this is like, well, I'd really like to work with Professor X in Sydney. So how can I do that? I could perhaps host my fellowship over there. I could perhaps add them as a collaborator and look for a fellowship that lets me have a research visit. I could have them on my advisory board for my fellowship. So there are lots of canny, clever ways that you can use your partners. But going back to that, the mistake number 2, that we don't talk to people enough. If they don't know you exist, you know, building a partnership, you literally aren't going to ask them to marry you, but it's going to take time. So thinking in a canny way about how you can make those partnerships work for you so that we have a brilliant value to that fellowship. It's like, oh, okay, so they're going to take the stuff that they developed in Oxford, they're going to host it in Glasgow, but we're also going to get that expertise from Sydney, Australia, because they're going to sit on the advisory board for the panel. That's good value for a fellowship committee. Okay. Who you help. Now, quite often people go, oh, I'm not quite sure. I haven't got any customers. Well, yeah, we don't have customers per se in academia, but we do have people who take on board the stuff that we give. So initially, the first person that you're going to help with a fellowship is you, because it's a big career enhancing thing. You're probably going to help your host at institute. You're probably helping the one that you've just left as well, because, you know, it's kudos to have a fellowship, you know, someone move on to a fellowship. Absolutely. But there are other people who might be interested. And I want you to think very broadly about stakeholders here, because I think, again, that can tap creativity. So increasingly on applications, we're looking at not only public outreach, but active public engagement in research, and thinking, oh, how could I get patients involved in this? How could I get manufacturers of the kit that I use involved in this? So thinking about listing all the people who have potential interest. And you can show on your friends and family on there too, because if you're choosing to go down this route, it probably has repercussions for them. So when in my business, I've always got, I'm mindful of that whatever I choose to do, that probably has an impact for my family one way or another. So I do include those other people in my life that, you know, not just the academics, but who has a stake, an interest in your research. Think widely, and then you can think creatively about how you can best make that value. There might be something that you can add that really does deliver value. Could you explain, you know, could you really provide some great information for patients about what you're doing or about the diseases that they're suffering from, whatever that might be? Could you get them involved? Could you have a patient on an advisory board for your fellowship, for instance? Quite often for charity funded work, you have patients sat on the panel. So again, if you've thought about them on your canvas and you've thought about what you're offering patients, then when they read your application, they're going to go, this is what we get as a patient group. I think we should fund this one, because they've clearly said what patients get out of it. So mapping out that field of stakeholders is really important. How they know you and how you deliver. So using that example of patients, how are you going to tell the patients? Is it going to be a website? Are you going to have little focus groups? Are you going to have one-to-ones in the hospital setting, depending on where you might be? So you've got this little truck, and this truck is taking your present to the world. If it's other academics, how do we reach them? Papers, conferences, seminars, Twitter, all sorts of things, however we might reach them. So there are lots of different ways that we can take our present that we've offered to the customer, and that might be different. So a one-to-one with a patient in hospital, we're not going to use that model to talk to our academic colleagues. You know, we're going to publish because that's easiest. Well, not easy, but that's the recognized way of doing it. So it's thinking about how we can get that value to those stakeholders. And again, all of this is modeling. Okay, so you can map it out, you can change it, you can think, okay, this isn't quite right. If you've written a fellowship for one funder, so it might be a small charity that fund the work into the disease that you're looking into, that will have one business canvas. You can then pivot that business canvas to perhaps apply something slightly different, like an MRC fellowship, which will be, has a different set of nuances, emphasis, rules, etc. And you can map it out again. How you interact with your customers, how are you going to build those relationships? So thinking about how you keep people informed, how you're going to perhaps run your network of collaborators. You will be the linchpin if you are a fellowship holder, but how are you going to do that? How are you going to get known in your department? So Craig here has got some things. Go to coffees. I'm always behind anyone who says go to coffee, but it's thinking about, kind of as an academic, it's your network. I talk to senior academics all the time, and it's their network that got them there. Okay, so that how you interact, how you develop that is going to be central if you're going to go down this route. And I should probably say that you can use this canvas to map out your career if you're looking at something else. Okay, the business model U site is brilliant for that. Okay, what you give costs. So not only are you, kind of probably working a lot, so you give a lot of time, researchers work incredibly hard, but also there is an opportunity cost associated with going to a fellowship. So you have lots of options as a postdoc. You could go all over the place. You could go into industrial R&D, you could go and run a coffee shop, you could do all that. So there is an opportunity cost there. It might be stressful. The pay is reasonable. Anyone who thinks that's not the case needs to look at what starting nurses and teachers are paid, but is thinking, yeah, it's not the big bucks that we might get working in the city. And then you've got the revenue and the benefits. So this is very personal for a fellowship. So yes, you will get the stipend. That's good. And you will probably get some consumable money. That's good. But you also need to think, what else are you getting personally? That sense of intellectual curiosity, all those sorts of things. Just go hop back to costs. Something leapt to mind that was actually, you need to make sure that you are friends with the finance person. That is the key. Being friends with the finance person in your department or where you are going to host, that is really key, because that's going to help you do that horrible form about the costings. Okay. This is my final but one slide. So that is the business model canvas that is accessible to you free of charge. So you can go to Business Model U and it's there. I have my own, which is here, which is slightly slightly different in that we've still got stakeholders, key stakeholders, that's you. We've got channels. Instead of relationships, I've put in unfair advantage, because this is about writing a grant or writing a fellowship is like what puts you above everyone else. So one lovely researcher went, oh, it's not very nice to be unfair. And I just thought, oh, well, that's a beautiful sentiment, but it is a competition. Okay, it's a competitive award. So what do you have going for you? And again, this will be tied into how you are a unique researcher. What big problem are you addressing? So not the tiny little thing. So it's like, I'm trying to cure cancer, for an example. What existing alternatives are there? You need to emphasize risk in your proposal. So ignoring that is a bad plan. You've got your solution. So what do you propose to do? What are the key metrics of success in this grant? So again, this comes to impact. So how many papers and when will they come out and where will they be? Which conferences are you going to? What are you going to patent it? Is there going to be code on GitHub, wherever it might be? Is it open access stuff, etc., etc.? So there are some key metrics in there. I'll come back to the middle box in a second. You've got the cost, personal and cash, and revenue, personal and cash. The middle box is, you might have heard of the USP or UVP, so your unique value proposition. What is it that is special, a very special present that you are offering the funder at this point? What can they get from you that they can't get from anyone else? And the high level concept, why do you need this? Because you have to write a layperson summary at some point. And that is the bit that everyone on the panel will read. So the layperson summary is really, really important. So that high level concept, can you articulate what you're trying to do, this beautiful, beautiful present, in something that your average Daily Mail reader can understand? That's what you need to do. Okay, that, as I said, was a whistle-stop tour. I am really happy to be contacted. So you can email me. As Carly said, I'm known as the Nerd Coach. So there's my website. I'm falling in love with Twitter currently. I've been on a Twitter course, and currently my tweets might actually contain real birds because I have a baby dove on my window ledge at the minute, which is rather cute, little squab. And if you want to pursue any of these ideas a bit further, then I offer some online courses. But I will hand over to Carly, because hopefully we've got some questions. Carly, do I need to stop sharing, Carly? Would that be helpful?
You can leave it on for just a few moments, just so people can jot those email addresses down. I'll just give you a moment to gather your thoughts and have a drink. That was really, really interesting. I think as academics, we often just want to apply to something, open up a Word document and start writing a research proposal. We don't think about this bigger picture, which is essentially what the canvas is, a bigger picture of value and impact and stakeholders and how actually we're going to tie all this together. And it's usually that week before submission that you're like, I haven't even thought about X. I need to come up with something. Whereas actually this maps it out really early on.
I'm going to encourage you to not fall into that first trap of timing for sure.
No, absolutely. So maybe if you can stop sharing now,
perfect.
And we'll switch to some questions that we've been receiving from the audience. I'll kick us off. You mentioned that we should think about which fellowship we apply to quite carefully. Does that mean really we should only be applying to maybe 1 or 2 fellowships per year? Or should we sort of have a shotgun approach where we're trying to apply to lots, which maybe aren't the best fit, but actually it can sometimes be a bit of a numbers game as well. So which approach should we be taking when choosing what to apply to?
I think if you the first thing to do is do a massive hunt for fellowships, because there are more out there than we know. So we will have heard of the ones that perhaps people in our department have got, but we won't necessarily have heard of them all. So I would do that big search, broad search, find out as much as possible. There are lists, again, probably on your university resources, there will be lists out there. And then look at carefully how that fits. So this is where this pivot comes. If you are really trying to get a square peg into a very tiny round hole, then it's just going to be too hard work, and they're probably going to reject you straight away. If you think, I'm almost there, but I just need to pivot a bit, again, talk to someone who's been through it. You can always talk to the funder, which I think people forget. So the funders are full of, guess what, people like me and you who were researchers and then went to work for a funder. So, you know, they're human beings too. And you can say, look, this is my idea, but I'm not quite sure whether it's right. And if they say no, you've saved a lot of time. If they've said yes, then you know you're on the right track. Do take advice from people. Talk to previous applicants. So, you know, if it's a Marie Curie, find people in your field who've had one and talk to them, and just, you know, kind of think about how that might pan out. If a fellowship is about moving, then obviously you need to move. So Marie Curie, they like that international experience. So you have to, you know, they haven't got room for exceptions. So, you know, there's no point ringing out Marie Curie and going, well, actually, I just want to stay where I am. And they're going, well, that's not what this is about. So, yeah. So, you know, don't ask for something that you're definitely not going to get. But I think it's always worth that thing. But do a broad search first, because you might find some small pots of fellowship money that might be for you specifically. So if you're into a certain type of disease, there might be a fellowship for that specific disease. So again, small pots of usually charity money associated with diseases.
So essentially go for as many that are suitable for your work.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. And it is a numbers game. And if you don't get the first one that you apply for, you are in very good company. You know, academia is about that iceberg of, you know, success, and then all the grants and everything that you haven't applied for. So I think someone put on their CV of academic failure a couple of years ago, and it was comforting to read.
So a follow-up question to that, I've sort of mentioned applying to multiple fellowships at once. Do you think it's possible to be applying to fellowships and committing to that, but also exploring other options as well? Or do we really need to have pre-decided what we want to do? Because I mean, and you're a real expert in this, people often aren't sure what they want. Can we be applying to fellowships, but also exploring other options within academia, but also thinking, oh, do I want to go and move to industry? Can we do all that at once, or should we really be focusing on just fellowships if that's what we're applying to?
I think we need fellowships is kind of the plan A, and then you might have plans A1 through 6 of different types of fellowships, but we do need plans B, C, D, possibly up to Z. So you do need those other options. And my experience is that postdocs who are looking at a variety of options can get more surety that actually fellowship is the way that I want to go, because they've looked at the other options. So don't just, if you're sat in your first postdoc at the minute, just looking at fellowships, look at the other things. Worked with a researcher who, biological researcher, applied to lots of fellowships, really felt that she wasn't getting there. So she approached me to say, I've got to move to industry. And she sounded so miserable. But we helped her through the application. And about 6 months later, she went, why didn't I do this sooner? This is the best thing ever. She absolutely loved it, working for a big drugs company that we will keep anonymous. She really loved it. And so I think, you know, kind of academia is one route, but it isn't the only route. And also increasingly there is this idea of portfolio careers. So, you know, you might be an academic with a spin out company. You might go and work for that spin out company as a postdoc, get some experience, and think, oh, this is, I'm quite into this. This is where I want to go. Or you might then come back and think, oh, I want to develop my own idea and go down the fellowship route. Or if it's something that you're really passionate about, you might be able to develop a grant and then be a named researcher on that grant. So again, there are multiple ways of scaling the mountain, I think. But the underlying thing is that I'd really check in with yourself and check that you're happy. I think that was quite often we're on this trajectory in academia, and, you know, kind of we've always been the brightest and best at school and uni and things, and we've got to this stage and there is a lot of baggage behind us. But moving on, we need to move on positively and proactively, which is what I aim to do with my role. So, you know, check in and check that you're happy. Don't apply for a fellowship if actually you don't want to be like your boss, because that's the route that you're going down, the academic route. So yeah, to cut a long story short, yes, have some plan Bs and Cs, because that will force you to look wider, and it might reconfirm that this is the right choice, or you might find your absolute dream job out there.
Yeah, that sounds like really good advice. I think very often it's instilled in us that we should really focus on something and be sure we want to do that and only follow up on that one career choice, but actually having options is important. So we have a question from Rebecca Gill from Royal Holloway. And this is sort of changing tacks a little bit. I suppose a question is asking, what advice do you have for someone about to start writing either a fellowship or a grant or a thesis, and they've just got a blank document in front of them? Should they immediately turn to the canvas? Should they be looking at the application details? It's very, very daunting to just think, I'm going to apply to this. Like, what could we actually do today as an early career researcher? What first step could we take?
So I'm going to point at the canvas, because I think it is a really useful thing. And also you can start anywhere. So you can start on your favorite bit where you think, okay, I'm going to start on the revenue side, because I'll know what the salary is and I'll know what I'm going to get out of it, and I'm going to get intellectual curiosity, and then you can spread round. Or what you could do is sit down to sort of literally bullet point your ideas and sit down and talk to someone, and if they're amenable, record that conversation so that you've captured those ideas, and then kind of with Word or a transcription, then you've already got something that's going to need editing, but you've got away from the blank page. And I think if you could perhaps do, we're having a conversation now, you could just dial into a friend on Zoom and record it and transcribe it, and then you've not got that blank document, because I hate a blank page B. It's terrifying. And also they're blank boxes, and that you've got to fill in 10 of them or something. Or you could pick a box that you on the form that you think, actually, that's where I want to go. I'm going to start here. A really nice sort of bullet point tool is called Flowy, where you can just put in bullet points, and then you can add sort of infinite levels of bullet points, which I find really helpful when I'm writing a big document. It's like, right, I just put 3 ideas down, and then I'll pad them out, or I put in resources underneath, and soon you can, even within an hour, you've got quite a chunky amount of words and things. So it's staring at the form, not so good. And my big piece of advice is never ever do the only draft in the form. So you should always be writing the boxes in a Word document or whatever software that you use, and then the final thing is a cut and paste into what will predictably be some horrible online form that allows you to only write in Comic Sans in 13-point font or something similar. But kind of always start somewhere else in a Word document or similar, and save it everywhere that you can.
I really like that idea of finding a willing participant for a recorded conversation, because actually just chatting to somebody, you start bouncing ideas, and that's actually a really easy start to just have a conversation and actually feel like you've made a start.
That is where all my blogs come from. I'm too lazy to write, so I will record videos that I've made, transcribe them, and then I'll get my VA to turn robot English into actual English. So yeah.
Brilliant. So that hour and a quarter has actually flown past. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we all go our separate ways, I just want to highlight a few things to our audience. I can just share my screen. Okay. So obviously lots of people watching are from the British Society of Gene and Cell Therapy. Some of you will be members, some of you won't be members. I just want to highlight that the European Society of Gene and Cell Therapy are running their annual congress in Edinburgh this year. And as a BSGCT member, you get automatic ESGCT membership for this year only. And by having that membership, you get reduced rates to the congress this year. And one really, really cool perk of this is that students who submit an abstract actually have their full registration costs waived. So any students out there who think they might want to go to this Congress, become a member and submit an abstract and you can go for free. Obviously, if you become a member, there are lots of other perks as well. I've listed those here. You can check out our website. You get access to our newsletter, you get access to the mentoring scheme, various funding streams and potential lab projects hosting students, that kind of thing, if you become a member. I also want to highlight this last point here, that from this seminar alone, you can gain continuing professional development credits, 6 credits per ECR seminar. So for this seminar today, if you are registered with the Royal Society of Biology for CPD credits, you can scan that QR code or go to the form there, fill in your details, and you can gain credits for all of our ECR seminars. Our next ECR seminar will be after the summer, so details are to follow later on in the summer. But we do have a BSGCT research seminar coming up next month. So subject to change, this isn't fully confirmed yet, but we should have a seminar from virus cell biologics next month, which you can all tune into, and details will be appearing on our Twitter page, LinkedIn, and on the website. So all that's really left for me to say on behalf of the audience is thank you, Emma, so much for joining us today and sharing all of your experience and actually showing what you can offer. People can follow you on Twitter and LinkedIn and follow up with you after this seminar. And also thank you for the audience for joining and for those that submitted questions and engaging with you today. I think it's been really, really informative. And thank you. And we will hope to see you all again in our BSGCT seminars going forward. So thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.